Hello everyone, in today's video I'm going to show you how to make television illustration, and this is gonna be easy, so let's get into it. First of all, you need to set up your workspace first, and to do that you can click this to open fill and stroke tab. Then you need to click this to open align and distribute tab. Then make sure if it's last selected. The next thing you need to do is you can download this color palette if you want to have the same color as I have right here, and you can go to description box, download it, and then go to file, import the color palette. The first thing that I want to make is this television, and to do that I'm gonna grab rectangle tool, and then by holding Ctrl and Shift I'm gonna make a square like this. And you notice right here, if the square have sharp corner, and I want to make the square is having like little curvy like this. And to do that I'm gonna select the square first and then go to rectangle tool, and you can see right here we can slide down the dot, and I'm gonna slide down a little bit like this, and we have curvy corners like this. I'm gonna make the screen, and to do that I'm gonna duplicate the square by holding Ctrl and D, and then I'm gonna color it yellow. After that, by holding Ctrl and Shift I'm gonna scale it down like this. I need to make sure that the thickness of the television is actually pretty good, because I don't want this to be too thick and I don't want that to be too thin. After that I want to make a little space right here, the below part, the bottom part of the television for the button. And to do that I'm gonna grab this thing by holding left click mouse. I'm gonna slide it up, and I think that's good. The next thing that I want to do is making the button, and to do that I'm gonna grab rectangle tool again and then simply draw rectangle like this. And you can see right here the corner is actually over curvy, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm gonna click this to make corner sharp again to reset everything, and then I'm gonna slide this down and make sure if it's not too curvy. Then I'm gonna move it right here, and I'm just gonna eyeball that, probably scale it down a little bit. And if you want to keep the shape, don't forget to hold Ctrl and Shift to make sure that the shape is the same as the scale before. And I think that's pretty good. Yeah. After that I want to make 3 buttons, but it's gonna be smaller than this, and to do that I'm just gonna duplicate this first by holding Ctrl and D, and then I'm gonna move it to the right. Don't forget to hold Ctrl because I don't want this asymmetries. And then I want to make it narrower, and I think that's good. And the next thing I want to do with this square is actually scale it down And by holding Ctrl and Shift, I'm gonna scale it down like this. After that, I want to duplicate this square twice. I'm gonna duplicate this by holding Ctrl and D, and then by holding Ctrl, I'm gonna slide it to the right. Gonna do the same. So you notice right here, we actually have different gaps between the square, and we need to distribute that equally. To do that, I'm gonna block all of the 3 squares, and after I select them all, I click this. So the distribution for each gaps of the square is actually equal. And I'm gonna deselect everything. The next thing that I want to make is the television antenna, and to do that, I'm gonna grab a circle tool to make half of the circle. And I want to make it oval, and I think that's good. And also I only need the half of the thing right here, the oval. And you can see right here, we actually can move around the handle. And I want to make sure if the object is actually half the circle. And to do that, I'm gonna hold Ctrl first before moving this dot. And by doing that, I can make sure that it's only half of the oval that I use. After going to selection tool, I'm gonna flip selected objects vertically, and then I want to make it bigger a little bit. And to do that, I'm gonna hold Ctrl and Shift to make sure that the shape is actually the same as it is. After that, I want to click this to lower selection one step for this part. Then I'm gonna deselect everything. The next thing that I want to do is to make the stick for the antenna, and to do that, I'm gonna grab rectangle tool, and I'm just gonna make a stick right like this. And then I'm gonna duplicate this by selecting this and then holding Ctrl and D. And I'm gonna slide this to the left to make it shorter. After that, I'm gonna double click this object, and then by sliding to the right, I can make it more tilted to the right like this. And for this one, I want to make it vertical but more tilted to the left. And I think that's good. The next part is I'm gonna select both of them. After that, I'm gonna click this to group selected object. And then I'm gonna click this to lower selection to the bottom. The next thing that we need to do is to make the cabinet, and to do that, I'm gonna grab this tool again, rectangle tool, and then I'm gonna draw a rectangle like this. I think that's good. And I'm gonna use the width to be 315. and the height is 302. If you have this object too big, you can scale it down, but if you have this object too small, you can scale it up. And I think that's good for me. The next part is the top part of the cabinet, and to do that I'm gonna grab a rectangle tool again, and then I'm gonna draw a rectangle like this. After that I'm gonna color it probably purple, and I want to make the corners to be more curvy, and to do that I'm gonna go to rectangle tool again, and then I'm gonna reset first. After that I'm gonna slide this down, and I think that's good. And I want to do the same thing for this red rectangle, and to do that I'm gonna go to selection tool and select this red rectangle first and go to rectangle tool. After that I'm gonna reset that first, and then I'm gonna zoom out a little bit, and then I'm gonna slide this down, and I think that's good curve. And then I want to make sure if this part is actually centered with the red part, and I'm just gonna select the purple part first, and then by holding shift I'm gonna select the red part, and then go to align and distribute tab, and then click this to center on vertical axis. After that I want to make the fit of the cabinet, and to do that I'm gonna grab rectangle tool again, and then I'm gonna draw a square like this. After that I want to make the corner to be sharp first to reset the corners, and then I'm gonna slide this down a little bit, and I think that's good curve. And then I'm gonna scale it up a little bit. I think that's too big. I'm gonna scale it down, and I think that's good. The next thing that I want to do is actually duplicate the feet, and to do that I'm gonna hold Ctrl and D to duplicate that, and then by holding Ctrl I'm gonna move it to the right, and then I'm gonna group the cabinet feet, and to do that I'm gonna select both of them first and then group selected object. After that I want to make sure if it's centered with the red part, and to do that I'm gonna select the purple, this purple feet first, and then hold shift and select the red part. After that click this to center on vertical axis. After that I'm gonna lower it on the bottom, and I'm just simply click this. The next thing that I want to do is actually make the handle of the cabinet, and I'm just gonna grab a circle to like right here, and then make an oval. And because we actually use half of the oval before, we want to reset that, and to do that I'm gonna click this to make it full again. I'm gonna make it wider a little bit, and then make it smaller. After that I'm gonna duplicate that by holding Ctrl and D, and then by holding Ctrl I'm gonna move it to the right, like this. After that, I'm gonna select both of them, and then I'm gonna group them. After that, I'm gonna select the yellow handle first, and then by holding shift, I'm gonna select the red part, and then click this to center on vertical axis. After that, I want to make a line by using rectangle tool. And then I'm gonna click this to make corner sharp. And I think that's good. After that, I'm gonna make sure if it's centered, and to do that, I'm gonna select the yellow part first, and then by holding shift, I'm gonna select the red part, and you can click this to make sure if it's centered. After that, I gonna remove this part, and to do that, I'm gonna duplicate the red part first by holding Ctrl and D, and then select the red part first, and then hold shift and select the yellow part, and then go to path and intersection. I want to make sure if it's centered again. And then the next part, I want to make adjustment for the handle. And I think that's good enough. The next thing that we want to do is actually color all of them. And I'm gonna go to fill and stroke tab. After that, I'm gonna select this part of cabinet. Actually, I want to make it to the top of everything, and to do that, I'm just gonna raise selection to top. And then I'm gonna grab color picker right here, and I'm gonna select this brown. And for this one, because it's actually a group object, I'm gonna use this color picker, and I'm gonna grab this brown color. And then for this part, I'm gonna use this brown, this little lighter brown. And then for the television, I'm gonna use this green. And to make it easier, I'm gonna select all of them, and then by clicking color picker, I'm gonna select the color that I want. The last one is the antenna, and I'm gonna color it green. And for this stick of the antenna, I'm gonna color it this dark brown. And I think that's good. The next part is we can group the television first, and I'm just gonna block the area. After that, I'm gonna click this to group selected object, and I'm gonna group this cabinet. I'm gonna do the same and click this. After that, I want to make sure if it's actually put above the cabinet. And to do that, I'm gonna select the television first, and then by holding shift I'm gonna select the cabinet. After that, I'm gonna go to align and distribute tab, and I'm gonna click this one. So it's actually done, and you can actually leave this video. But if you want to have a little bit insight about what I meant in the previous video about the style that I want to achieve, you can stay, because I want to explain you about the thing about the previous illustration style that I have. I'm just gonna import that real quick. So as I said before that I don't want to use rectangle tool or circle tool or maybe polygon tool, because I want to achieve a certain style. And here is the thing: if I use a rectangle tool or maybe a circle tool or any this kind of tool instead of Bezier tool, I couldn't achieve this kind of style, which actually I really like. And the part that I learned about finding or using illustration style is actually you want to make sure if your illustration is mainly use Bezier tool, or you actually want to have a rectangle tool. And if I use this tool, I actually am gonna have two stiff illustration for my illustration before. Not that it's bad, but it's actually not suitable for my previous illustration. And I hope that gives you a little bit insight about how to achieve a certain style in your illustration. And that's all. If you like this kind of video, don't forget to like and subscribe. And thanks for watching. Goodbye.